The alarm buzzed at 6:30 a.m., cutting through the silence of the dimly lit bedroom. Emily Carter stirred first, brushing her fingers across the sheets where Jason once used to lie close. Now he was already in the shower, efficient, punctual, and distant. She sat up slowly, wrapping her robe tighter around her as she moved to the kitchen. The smell of coffee drifted through the apartment, automatic and impersonal, much like their mornings. Jason emerged minutes later, towel-drying his hair, already buttoning his shirt. "Morning," she said, placing a mug on the counter. "Thanks," he replied, eyes fixed on his phone. A pause. "Got that early client call today. Might not be back for dinner." Emily nodded. No surprise. No resentment. Just routine. She watched him leave with a quick peck on the cheek, the kind meant more to acknowledge existence than express affection. The door clicked shut behind him, and the silence that followed felt heavier than the conversation they hadn't had. They weren't unhappy, exactly. They were just fading. 5 years into their marriage, and the spark had dulled into habit. Jason wasn't cruel or unfaithful. He was loyal, responsible, and increasingly absent, even when present. Their conversations had thinned into logistics. "Did you pay the bill? What time's your meeting? Can you grab milk?" Emily didn't want grand gestures. She wanted to be seen. At the office, she came alive in ways she no longer did at home. As a marketing executive, Emily thrived on ideas, energy, movement. Her voice carried in meetings, not loud but compelling. She was articulate, respected, and recently noticed. Nathan Black, her boss and the company's regional director, had a way of making everyone feel important. He had a presence, tall, sharp suits, a voice like velvet and thunder. He didn't dominate conversations, he invited them. With him, even a mundane campaign review felt electric. Emily wasn't blind to his charisma, nor naive to the subtle attention he offered her. It began with professional praise. "Your insight on the holiday rollout saved that pitch," he'd said after a tense meeting. That was sharp thinking. She had smiled, flattered. "Just doing my job." "No," he replied. "You're doing it exceptionally." It wasn't the compliment that lingered, it was the way he looked at her when he said it. Like she mattered. Like he saw her. Their interactions were always appropriate, never crossing any line, but they hummed with an unspoken energy. At first, she dismissed it. Harmless admiration. He treated other employees kindly, too. But there were differences. He remembered small details about her, asked questions that Jason hadn't in months. "How's your painting going?" he asked once, referencing a hobby she'd all but given up. "I haven't had time lately," she replied, surprised he remembered. "You should make time," he said. "You used to talk about it with spark in your eyes." Emily had laughed it off, but later, the words echoed back. When was the last time someone noticed something that wasn't tied to her work or household obligations? One afternoon, after a long brainstorming session, Emily and Nathan walked out of the conference room together. The hallway was quiet, fluorescent lights buzzing softly above them. "You ever feel like you're waiting for something to change, but you're not sure what?" he asked, seemingly out of nowhere. She hesitated. "All the time." Their eyes met. Just for a moment. Then he smiled, nodded, and veered into his office. That night, Jason was late again. Emily sat on the couch with a half glass of wine, reruns playing in the background. She stared at her phone, then at the door, then back again. Her thoughts drifted not to the silence in the apartment, but to the conversation in the hallway. She didn't want to feel this way. She was married. Committed. But she couldn't deny the hollow ache that had crept into her chest, nor the curiosity that flickered just beneath her guilt. Emily stood and turned off the TV. She walked to the bedroom and pulled out an old sketchbook from the closet. The pages smelled of graphite and forgotten ambition. She hadn't drawn in over a year. As the pencil moved across the page, her mind wandered, not to the man she had married, but to the man who had asked if she still painted. And for the first time in months, she felt something stir. Something dangerous. Something alive. Rain lashed against the high windows of the downtown restaurant, blurring the city lights into a watery glow. The company's quarterly dinner was in full swing, laughter echoing off polished wood and clinking glasses. Emily sat at the long table, her dress a deep emerald that complemented her quiet elegance, her smile gracious but forced. She glanced at her phone, no messages from Jason. He was stuck on a last-minute deployment issue, too busy to attend. He hadn't even asked what she'd be wearing. Across the table, Nathan caught her eye. The seat beside her was empty, conveniently so. He slid into it without asking, glass of bourbon in hand. His presence was composed, but something in his gaze hinted at mischief, or maybe something lonelier. "You clean up well," he said casually. Emily chuckled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "So do you." "Still intimidating, though." "Only outside the office," he replied, voice low. "Tonight, I'm just a man trying to relax." There was a pause, a weight to his words. She sipped her wine, pulse betraying her composure. The conversation turned light, banter about coworkers, travel plans, marketing trends, but beneath it was an undercurrent. Each smile lingered too long, each laugh felt too intimate. They weren't just talking. They were circling something. An hour later, people began to drift out. Nathan stood, adjusting his jacket. "You parked nearby?" he asked. "Couple blocks over." "Let me walk you." She hesitated. The rain hadn't let up, and the warmth of the restaurant clung to her skin like a second layer. Still, she nodded. "Sure." They stepped into the storm, huddled under the small awning at the restaurant's side entrance. Streetlights shimmered on the wet pavement, cars passed in a blur, and the moments stretched between them, quiet, fragile, electric. He looked at her, his voice barely audible over the rain. "I know I probably shouldn't say this, but I think about you. More than I should." Emily's breath caught, not from shock, but from the realization that she'd been waiting to hear it. She looked up at him, searching his face. "Why now?" "I don't know. Maybe because tonight, you looked like you wanted to be seen." Her heart thudded against her ribs, reason grappling with desire. She could step back, laugh it off, go home. She could pretend this was just a passing storm. Instead, she whispered, "I don't know what I'm doing." He reached for her hand, just lightly. "Neither do I." The decision wasn't loud. It was a quiet surrender. A soft lean forward, a shared breath, a kiss that began with hesitation and ended with something she couldn't name. They didn't speak as he hailed a cab, didn't touch again until the elevator doors closed behind them. In the room, it wasn't the bed that drew her. It was the silence, the way it wrapped around them like a secret. He took her coat slowly, like she might change her mind. She didn't. The kiss deepened, the space between them disappeared. Hands explored, mouths remembered. She wasn't thinking about consequences. She was chasing a feeling of being wanted, understood, known. Not as a wife or an employee, but as a woman with fire still flickering in her. Time blurred. The rain continued its song outside the hotel window. When it was over, they lay side by side, not speaking. She stared at the ceiling, heart a mess of adrenaline and regret. Nathan turned to her, his fingers brushing her knuckles. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, barely. "I should go." He didn't stop her. She dressed quietly, avoiding mirrors. Every movement felt sharp, conscious, like waking from a dream she'd willingly entered. In the lobby, the cold air rushed to meet her. She stepped out into the street, now calm, the rain a whisper on her shoulders. The city looked different, distant, as if it had shifted while she wasn't looking. By the time she reached her car, her hands trembled. She sat behind the wheel, gripping it tightly, breath fogging up the glass. Her phone buzzed. "Jason. Still working. Don't wait up." She stared at the message, eyes burning. No one knew. No one would. But everything had changed. Emily hadn't returned to that hotel, nor had she spoken to Nathan beyond the occasional polite nod in the office hallway. Whatever happened that night was a sealed chapter, but the ink hadn't dried. Days passed in a muted blur. At home, she moved like a ghost through familiar routines, careful with her tone, more attentive with her timing. Jason, true to form, didn't notice the change. Or maybe he did, and chose silence over confrontation. She caught herself watching him, closer longer. How his eyes flickered between his screens, how he chewed on the inside of his cheek when he concentrated. Once, she thought about placing her hand over his, just to feel connection. But fear held her back. Or guilt. Maybe both. At night, she lay beside him, wide-eyed in the dark. Their bodies inches apart, yet galaxies away. Her mind replayed that night in flickers, the warmth of Nathan's breath, the weight of the silence before it all unfolded, the way her heart had beat not with love, but with recognition. Someone had seen her, chosen her. But now, alone in the aftermath, she questioned everything. The next morning, her phone buzzed. "Nathan, are you okay?" She stared at the message, thumb hovering over the screen. One reply could shatter the fragile barrier she was trying to rebuild. Her chest tightened. She deleted it. Yet the words lingered, haunting her during meetings, clinging to her during commutes. Every time she saw him in passing, composed, unreadable, she wondered if he regretted it too, or if it had meant something different to him.
She didn't ask. She didn't want the answer.
A week later, Jason came home early. No warning, no reason, just there. He stood in the doorway, watching her load the dishwasher. "Want to order in?" he asked, voice softer than usual.
She paused.
"Sure." They ate on the couch, watching a movie they barely followed. Halfway through, she realized it had been months since they'd shared a meal that wasn't microwaved or eaten in silence. Jason leaned back, eyes fixed on the screen. "You've seemed off lately." Her throat tightened. "Just work stuff. End of quarter stress." He nodded slowly, as if deciding whether or not to dig deeper. Then, without warning, he reached out and held her hand.
It was simple,
uncomplicated, but it broke something inside her. Tears welled suddenly, catching her off guard. She turned her face away, wiping them fast. "Hey," he said gently. "What's going on?" She couldn't answer. Not without unraveling the fragile life they'd built. Not without confessing the thing that now sat like a stone in her chest. "I don't know," she whispered. He pulled her closer, held her tightly for the first time in what felt like forever. She wanted to believe this could fix them. That one gesture could undo the silence, the distance, the betrayal he didn't know existed. But deep down, she knew something had fractured. Not just between them. Within her. The next morning, she passed Nathan in the hallway. He didn't stop her.
didn't speak.
Just met her eyes with a brief, knowing look. Neither apology nor invitation. Just understanding. She offered a faint smile. A polite one. But the sadness in her gaze betrayed more than words could. Back at her desk, she opened a new browser tab. Searched for couples counseling. Closed it again. Later that day, she pulled her old sketchbook from her drawer during lunch. The same one she'd dug out after their first lingering conversation weeks ago. She flipped to a blank page, pencil poised. She didn't draw Nathan. She didn't draw Jason either. She drew herself. A woman standing in the rain, hair plastered to her skin, eyes open to the sky. No umbrella. No shelter. Just stillness. Because that's what it felt like now, standing in the aftermath. Not broken. Not whole. Just changed. The infidelity hadn't come from malice. It hadn't been premeditated. It had grown quietly, watered by neglect and starved of meaning. She wasn't proud, but she wasn't numb anymore. Some part of her had awakened. And now there was no going back.